Please, close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the scent of the thick nylon housecoat your grandmother used to wear when she baked fresh pastries on a Saturday afternoon. Listen closely and you might just hear the distant, crackling static of a tiny sokol radio broadcasting the weekend football match from a blanket by the shores of Lake Balaton. Welcome back to a time that feels both like yesterday and a lifetime ago. Today, we are taking a gentle, melancholic stroll through Hungary in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. We will revisit 20 peculiar habits, household items, and everyday beliefs that were completely normal to us but would leave today's youth utterly bewildered. These are the beautifully absurd rituals of a bygone era. And stay with me until the very end, because the final memory we will share is the one beautiful Sunday tradition that anchored our entire childhood, and I promise it will bring a warm tear to your eye. Before we begin our journey, let us remember how time itself used to feel. Back then, time flowed slower, like honey pouring from a jar. There was no instant gratification, no rushing to answer a message within seconds, and no constant buzzing of notifications in our pockets. We understood the profound value of waiting. We waited for letters, we waited for the television broadcast to start, and we even waited years just to buy a simple car. Today, young people might look at our past and think our lives were restricted, assuming that without modern technology, we lived emotionally poorer lives. But you and I know the exact opposite is true. The scarcity of things created an abundance of sincere human connection. Because we could not just send a text message, we had to walk over to our neighbor's house and knock on their door. Because we did not have 100 television channels, we sat around the table and looked into each other's eyes. Life in those days was richer, deeper, and full of an innocence that we often ache to get back. Let us rediscover that magic. Let us start with something truly unimaginable today. Do you remember the absolute silence of the television set on a Monday evening? In our modern world, children have thousands of channels available at any given second, broadcasting all day and all night. But back then, Monday was the day the Hungarian state television simply rested. There were no broadcasts, just a silent screen. Today's youth would call this an absurd punishment, but we knew it as a blessing in disguise. Without the glowing blue light drawing our attention away, the dining table became the heart of the home again. Fathers would bring out the worn deck of Hungarian suited cards featuring the legend of William Tell, and mothers would mend socks while humming softly. We would sit together, playing board games or just talking about our day. The Monday broadcast break was not a deprivation of entertainment. It was a mandatory pause for family connection, a sacred evening where we actually listened to one another without distraction. And now let us remember the ultimate uniform of the Hungarian homemaker, the legendary nylon housecoat. If you grew up in those decades, the image of your mother or grandmother wearing a brightly colored, intensely patterned nylon garment is forever burned into your memory. These housecoats came in loud floral prints or dizzying geometric shapes. They were practical, they dried in minutes, and they required absolutely no ironing. But what makes them truly nostalgic is the sensory experience. You could hear your grandmother approaching by the distinct rustling sound the nylon made with every step she took, and the static electricity was formidable. When she pulled it off over her head in the dark, you could literally see tiny blue sparks flying in the air. Today, young people would find the synthetic fabric uncomfortable, but for us, that rustling, brightly colored garment was the ultimate symbol of maternal care, smelling faintly of paprika, fried onions, and unconditional love. Let us talk about the strange and wonderful ritual of buying milk. Today, milk comes in hard plastic bottles or neat cardboard cartons with screw-top caps. But we remember the soft, wobbly plastic bags. Buying milk meant carefully inspecting the bags in the crate at the state grocery store to make sure none were leaking, though your hands always ended up a little sticky anyway. Bringing it home required a special plastic pitcher specifically designed to hold the wobbly bag upright, and then came the delicate surgery of opening it. You had to take the kitchen scissors and snip off just a tiny triangle from the top corner. If you cut the hole too big, the milk would spill everywhere when you poured it. If you cut it too small, it would take forever to fill a glass. Drinking that cold milk, alongside a thick slice of white bread with a little butter, felt like a feast. The plastic bag milk is a perfect symbol of our era. Imperfect, slightly inconvenient, but deeply ingrained in the warmth of our morning routines. Can you imagine telling a young person today that you had to wait 5 to 10 years just to purchase a car? And not a luxury car, but a simple 2-stroke Trabant or a blocky Lada. The process of buying a car through the state enterprise was an epic saga of patience. First, you saved up the down payment. Then, you submitted your application and received a magical sequence of numbers on a postcard. And then, you waited. You waited while your children grew taller. You waited while seasons changed. When the notification finally arrived years later that your car was ready for pickup, it was treated like a major family holiday. We did not even get to choose the color. If a pale yellow Trabant was assigned to you, then pale yellow was your new favorite color. Because we waited so long, we treated these cars like beloved members of the family. The weekend car washing ritual in the courtyard of the apartment block was a communal event where fathers polished the metal with intense pride, cherishing what took a decade to achieve. And speaking of those weekend rituals, let us take a moment to recall the heavy, rectangular shape of the Sokol radio. Encased in genuine leather that smelled deeply of chemicals and age, this little portable device was our absolute connection to the outside world during the summer. Whether you were sitting on a blanket at the grassy shores of Lake Balaton, or working in the small garden plot on the outskirts of the city, the Sokol was always there. The dial was incredibly sensitive, and finding a clear station required the precision of a watchmaker. We would slowly turn the small plastic wheel, listening through the heavy static and the strange alien whistling sounds of shortwave frequencies, until the voice of the sports announcer suddenly broke through clearly. We listened to the Sunday afternoon football matches, the crackling voices bringing the stadium to our ears. That heavy little brick of technology felt like magic, turning a quiet lakeside afternoon into a shared national experience. Let us walk through the swinging doors of the local state grocery store, the beloved Közért. Even before you stepped inside, the aroma hit you. It was the rich, dark, intoxicating smell of freshly roasted coffee beans. Near the checkout counter stood the large red industrial coffee grinder. Buying coffee wasn't just grabbing a sealed bag from a shelf. It was a loud, mechanical event. You poured the pale brown beans into the top funnel, flicked the heavy metal switch, and the machine would roar to life, vibrating the entire counter. The freshly ground coffee poured down into your paper bag, warm to the touch and incredibly fragrant. The clerks wore pristine white coats, and the bread was not pre-sliced in plastic. You bought a massive, crusty loaf and wrapped it yourself in thick, rough grey paper. The tactile sensation of that rough paper, the roar of the grinder, and the polite exchanges with the clerk made grocery shopping a rich sensory ritual, far removed from the sterile supermarkets of today. Communication back then required patience and a healthy sense of boundaries, especially if you had a party line telephone. Today, everyone carries a personal supercomputer in their pocket. But in the 1970s, getting a telephone installed in your apartment was a luxury that took years, and when you finally got one, you often had to share the line with a complete stranger living in the next apartment block. This was the famous shared line system. If you picked up the heavy plastic receiver to make a call, you might hear your neighbor discussing their dinner plans or gossiping about relatives. You had to politely clear your throat or simply hang up and wait your turn. Sometimes, if there was an emergency, you had to break in and beg them to free up the line. It taught us an incredible amount of social etiquette and patience. We learned to respect the invisible boundaries of our neighbors' lives, connected by a single copper wire that bound our conversations together. When winter arrived and the first heavy frosts covered the ground, the countryside awakened to a ritual that today's urban youth would find shocking: the traditional winter pig slaughter. It was an event that demanded the participation of the entire extended family. We would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, our breath visible in the freezing dark air. The men would pass around a small glass of strong homemade plum brandy to warm their blood before the hard work began. It was a loud, messy, and intensely communal day. Women stood over large, steaming cauldrons, stirring the meat, while the rich, heavy smell of roasted onions and fresh blood filled the winter air. By evening, the entire family sat around a long wooden table, exhausted but deeply happy, feasting on fresh sausages and singing old songs. It was not just about processing food. It was a powerful celebration of survival, of family bonds, and of providing for one another through the harsh, cold winter months. Let us shift our memories back to our school days, specifically to the grand, chaotic event known as the Pioneer Paper Collection. Being a member of the Pioneer Youth Movement meant wearing your bright red tie with pride, but it also meant participating in mandatory community work. For weeks, every student would scour their apartment blocks, knocking on neighbors' doors, politely asking for old newspapers, magazines, and cardboard boxes. We would tie these massive stacks together with rough twine that cut into our fingers as we carried them to the schoolyard. The schoolyard would slowly transform into a mountainous landscape of old paper. Classes competed fiercely against each other to see who could collect the most kilograms. The prize was usually just a simple certificate or a small badge, but the pride was immense. It taught us resourcefulness, teamwork, and how to charm the grumpy old man on the third floor into giving up his 10-year collection of agricultural magazines. While children in Western countries might have been playing Monopoly and learning about capitalism, we were sitting on the carpet playing the iconic board game called Manage Wisely. This game was a perfect reflection of our society. The goal was not to bankrupt your friends or buy up entire streets of hotels. The ultimate objective was much more modest and deeply realistic. You had to save up enough paper money to buy an apartment, furnish it with a wardrobe and a television, and perhaps buy a bicycle. If you landed on the wrong square, you were fined for leaving the water running or for breaking a window. If you were lucky, you received a bonus for good behavior at work. We would spend hours meticulously organizing our colorful little paper banknotes and placing tiny cardboard furniture pieces onto our game board apartments. It was a game that taught us the virtues of saving, moderation, and socialist morality, long before we understood what those words actually meant. Do you recall the exhilarating, slightly terrifying thrill of a shopping trip to Vienna? In the late 1970s and 80s, traveling to the West was highly restricted, and taking hard currency out of the country was strictly limited. A trip across the border was a monumental family mission. The preparations involved finding incredibly creative places to hide those precious Austrian shillings or German marks. We folded the colorful Western banknotes into tiny squares and stuffed them inside our socks, tucked them under the inner soles of our shoes, or hid them in the linings of our coats. We sat in the back of the Lada, hearts pounding as the stern border guards inspected our blue passports. And then the arrival in Vienna. The Maria-Hilfer-Straße felt like an alien planet filled with neon lights, colorful advertisements, and stores packed with unbelievable goods. Bringing back a Gorenje freezer, a few bars of Milka chocolate, or a digital watch felt like returning from a triumphant expedition. Let us pour a glass of nostalgia with the classic soda water siphon. Almost every household kitchen had a heavy, metallic, or brightly colored glass siphon sitting on the counter. Making soda water was a distinct, noisy ritual. You had to buy the small, heavy metal gas cartridges from the store, returning the empty ones in exchange. You would fill the bottle with cold tap water, screw on the thick plastic top, and then came the best part. You inserted the metal cartridge into the holder and twisted it hard. There was a loud, aggressive hissing sound as the pressurized gas shot into the water. Sometimes it would leak a little, spraying a cold mist onto your hands. The water it produced was incredibly carbonated, with large, biting bubbles that stung the back of your throat in the most refreshing way possible. Mixing that aggressive soda water with homemade raspberry syrup created the ultimate summer drink, a taste that modern, pre-packaged sodas have never been able to replicate. If we look closely at the doors of the apartments in those towering concrete block buildings, we remember a very specific interior design choice: the padded faux leather doors. Because the walls of the panel buildings were incredibly thin and you could hear every footstep in the stairwell, families tried to insulate their homes. The solution was covering the front door in thick, dark brown or burgundy faux leather, heavily padded underneath and secured with shining brass tacks arranged in a diamond pattern. When you ran your hand over it, it felt soft and slightly sticky, smelling permanently of vinyl and the dusty stairwell air. Pushing open that heavy, padded door felt like entering a safe, soundproof fortress. Behind those diamond-patterned doors stood our identical wall unit furniture sets, filled with crystal glasses that were only ever used for special occasions, and shelves lined with unread encyclopedias. The faux leather door was our soft shield against the noisy, shared world outside. Think back to the simple act of preparing a meal. Bread was not just a side dish, it was the absolute foundation of our diet, and handling it was a serious matter. We did not buy flimsy, pre-sliced bread wrapped in plastic. We bought a massive, dense, 2-kilogram loaf with a thick, dark crust that smelled like wood smoke and yeast. When it was time to eat, the father or grandfather of the household would take the loaf, press it firmly against his chest, and use a massive, terrifyingly sharp knife to slice it. Drawing the blade toward his own body required immense skill and confidence. He would cut perfect, thick slices, slightly uneven at the bottom. We would rub those thick slices with a raw clove of garlic, drizzle them with hot pork fat, and sprinkle them with red paprika and sliced purple onions. That fatty bread was our fast food, our comfort food, and our energy source. It was a rustic, hearty ritual that tasted like pure home. And what did we drink on those rare festive occasions when water or homemade syrup was not enough? We remember the unforgettable tastes of Bambi and Traubi soda. Before the global cola brands truly conquered the market, these were our sugary treasures. Bambi came in small, thick glass bottles with a rough, synthetic orange flavor that was overwhelmingly sweet, leaving a sticky residue on your lips. But Traubi soda, made from Hungarian grapes, was elegant and refreshing. The bottles had ribbed glass that felt satisfying to hold. Collecting the metal bottle caps was a hobby for every child. We would pry them off carefully with a coin so as not to bend the metal, and trade them in the schoolyard. Opening a bottle of Traubi on a hot July afternoon, hearing the sharp pop of the cap, and smelling that sweet artificial grape scent meant that the celebration was truly beginning. It was the taste of a carefree youth bottled in green glass. Let us step back into the courtyard on a Saturday morning where the grand ritual of carpet beating took place. In an era before powerful electric vacuum cleaners became common in every home, keeping the heavy living room rugs clean required physical labor and a strong arm. Every apartment complex had a sturdy metal frame installed in the yard specifically for this purpose. The father would roll up the heavy rug, carry it down the stairs, and drape it over the cold iron bars. Then, armed with a braided rattan carpet beater, he would unleash his energy. The rhythmic, echoing sound of the beater striking the thick fabric could be heard throughout the entire neighborhood. Plumes of grey dust would rise into the morning sunshine, drifting away in the breeze. Children would run around the metal frame, playing hide-and-seek beneath the hanging carpets. It was a loud, communal chore that everyone accepted as a normal part of weekend life, entirely foreign to the quiet, automated cleaning of today. We must also talk about the beautiful, predictable rhythm of the trade union holidays. Vacations back then were not booked on the internet, nor did they involve flying to exotic foreign islands. Instead, families applied for subsidized holidays at the trade union resorts, known as the SZOT resorts, mostly located around our beloved Lake Balaton. These resorts were massive, concrete structures offering modest, identical rooms, but the atmosphere was magical. We ate in huge communal dining halls where ladies in white aprons served simple, hearty meals from aluminum trays. The afternoons were spent eating fried dough with garlic and sour cream by the water, while the evenings featured live music and dancing on the concrete terrace. We mingled with factory workers, teachers, and miners from all over the country. The trade union holiday was a great social equalizer, a place where the whole nation seemed to gather in bathing suits to eat, laugh, and forget the hardships of daily work. Let us peek into the bathroom on a Saturday evening, where the ultimate beauty ritual was taking place. The majestic, terrifying hood hairdryer. Women did not have the sleek, quiet styling tools of today. Preparing for a Sunday family gathering or a theater visit meant washing the hair, rolling it tightly into massive plastic rollers secured with sharp metal pins, and then sitting under a giant, roaring plastic dome. The hood hairdryer was loud enough to drown out the television. It blew intensely hot air, making the scalp sweat and the neck ache. Grandmothers would sit perfectly still under that roaring helmet for nearly an hour, reading a magazine or knitting, waiting for the curls to set. When the dome was finally lifted and the rollers removed, the hair was sprayed with an incredible amount of strongly scented hairspray, creating a rigid, perfect shape that could withstand any wind. It was a true labor of love and patience, a weekly sacrifice for beauty. Music in the 80s required an entirely different kind of dedication. Today you can skip a song with the gentle tap of a finger, but we had cassette tapes, and cassette tapes were fragile, unpredictable, and precious. We would sit by the radio for hours with our fingers hovering over the record and play buttons, waiting for the DJ to play our favorite Western pop song. If the DJ talked over the intro, our recording was ruined. And when the tape player eventually decided to chew up the magnetic ribbon, pulling it out into a tangled, shiny mess, we did not throw it away. We carefully pulled the ribbon out, laid it flat, and used a simple hexagonal pencil to wind it back in. We would sit there, spinning the cassette around the pencil for minutes, nursing our precious music back to life. Listening to music was an active mechanical engagement. You earned the right to hear your favorite song by showing patience and manual dexterity. And finally, let us come to the absolute anchor of our childhood, the Sunday family lunch. This was not merely a meal, it was a sacred, unchangeable institution. At exactly 12 o'clock noon, the smell of golden meat soup filled every apartment in the building. The soup had been simmering on the stove since early morning, filled with carrots, celery, and homemade pasta. The table was set with the good plates, and everyone had to be present, wearing clean clothes. The television was off, the radio was silent, except for the midday bell ringing from the local church. The only sounds were the clinking of spoons against porcelain and the steady, rhythmic ticking of the mechanical wall clock in the background. That ticking clock measured out our youth, second by second, in a warm, safe environment where the family sat together. The golden soup was followed by breaded meat and cucumber salad. But it was the feeling of absolute security, the knowledge that every Sunday would be exactly like this, that made our childhood so beautifully complete. When we look back at the heavy Sokol radios, the noisy coffee grinders, or the silent television screens on a Monday night, we realize something profound. We do not actually miss the heavy, inconvenient objects themselves. What we truly miss is the way those objects brought us together. We miss the patience we had, the deep conversations over a shared telephone line, and the comfort of knowing our neighbors. We miss the slow, deliberate rhythm of a life where things were harder to get, but meant so much more once we had them. We miss our youth, our loved ones who are no longer sitting at the Sunday dinner table, and the golden innocence of a time that will never return. Thank you so much for walking down this beautiful, nostalgic path with me today. If this journey brought a warm smile to your face, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more memories. And now, I would love to hear from you. What is the one smell or sound from your childhood that instantly transports you back to your grandmother's house? Please share your beautiful stories in the comments below and let us keep these memories alive together.